I moved to Maplewood Estates 3 months ago, looking for peace. 34 years old. Software engineer, working remotely from home. The neighborhood seemed perfect on paper. 47 houses behind a gated entrance, manicured lawns, and HOA fees of $450 a month that supposedly guaranteed order and security. The real estate agent called it a community that takes pride in itself. What she didn't mention was who exactly enforced that pride, or how far they'd go to maintain control. I should have asked more questions. I should have noticed the way my new neighbors lowered their voices when they mentioned the HOA president, but I was too focused on the fiber internet connection and the home office space to pay attention to the warning signs hiding in plain sight. The first package disappeared on a Tuesday. I'd ordered a set of computer accessories from an online retailer. Nothing expensive, maybe $80 total. The tracking notification hit my phone at 2:47 p.m. Delivered. Front door. Standard stuff. I was in a meeting until 5, so I didn't check the porch until 5:30. Empty. Empty. No box. No slip. No indication that anything had been delivered at all. I walked the perimeter of my house, thinking maybe the driver had left it by the side door or the garage. Nothing. I checked with my immediate neighbors, an older couple named the Atwoods, but they hadn't seen any delivery truck. That night, I filed a claim with the retailer and chalked it up to a mistake. Packages get misdelivered sometimes. It happens. I told myself it was a one-time thing and moved on with my week. The second package vanished exactly 1 week later. This time, it was a book I'd been waiting for, a technical manual that cost me $45 with expedited shipping. Same story. Tracking said delivered at 3:12 p.m. The porch was empty when I got there at 6. I immediately pulled up my Ring doorbell footage, expecting to catch a porch pirate in action. Instead, I found something that made my stomach tighten. The footage from 2:30 to 3 p.m. was corrupted. Not missing. Corrupted. Garbled pixels. Static bursts. Then nothing. The recording resumed at 3:01, with my porch sitting empty in the afternoon sun. I spent 2 hours troubleshooting my camera system, checking the Wi-Fi signal, and resetting the device. Everything tested fine. The corruption made no technical sense. That was the first anomaly, and it planted a seed of suspicion I couldn't quite name yet. I started paying closer attention to the neighborhood after that. Maplewood Estates operated like a small kingdom, and its queen was Victoria Langford. She lived in the largest corner house, a 2-story colonial with white columns and immaculate landscaping. 52 years old, always dressed in business casual, hair never out of place. She'd been HOA president for 8 consecutive years, running unopposed every time. I met her 3 days after I moved in, when she knocked on my door with a welcome basket and a clipboard. The basket contained a scented candle and a list of community rules. The clipboard held a checklist she was filling out while standing on my porch. "Just making sure the exterior meets our standards," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She noted my curtain colors, my trash bin positions, my grass height. Before she left, she reminded me that violations started at $100. "We maintain excellence here. I'm sure you understand." There was one neighbor who caught my attention during those early weeks. Jonah Whitaker lived in the house directly across from mine. Mid-50s, quiet, rarely seen outside. He drove a plain sedan and kept his blinds mostly closed. What made him notable was the frequency of his deliveries. Almost every other day, a carrier would drop off small packages at his door, many with labels I'd never seen before. Official-looking seals, priority stamps in red ink, government logos I couldn't identify from a distance. I noticed that Victoria paid unusual attention to Jonah's house, more than once. I saw her standing near his mailbox with her clipboard, watching his front door. Jonah seemed to avoid her deliberately, timing his exits to moments when her car was gone. I filed this observation away without understanding its significance. That understanding would come later, delivered not by a mail carrier, but by something far louder. The third package disappeared 2 weeks after the second, and this time, I was ready. I'd adjusted my camera settings, increased the recording quality, and set up motion alerts directly to my phone. The package was a replacement for the first lost order, reshipped by the retailer. Tracking confirmed delivery at 2:51 p.m. I was in a meeting, but checked the alert immediately. The footage showed the delivery truck pulling up, the driver walking to my porch, and placing the box by my door, clear as day. Then I watched what happened next. At 3:15 p.m., a figure appeared at the edge of the frame. Gray coat, hat pulled low, moving with purpose, not hesitation. The figure walked up my driveway, picked up the package, and walked away in less than 20 seconds. I paused the video and zoomed in, trying to get a clear look at the face. The angle was wrong, and the hat blocked most features. But I caught one detail that stopped my breath. On the figure's right hand, there was a ring, gold band, large setting, with a stone that caught the light even in the compressed video quality. A red stone. I'd seen that ring before. I'd seen it 3 days after I moved in, resting on a clipboard while its owner cataloged my curtain colors. I'd seen it at community mailboxes, at HOA meetings, at the entrance gate where Victoria Langford liked to stand and watch residents come and go. The ring belonged to her. I was certain of it. Suddenly, the corrupted footage from those earlier deliveries made a different kind of sense. Not a technical glitch, a deliberate erasure. Someone with access, with knowledge of security systems, with the arrogance to believe they'd never be caught. I sat in my home office that night, staring at the frozen frame on my screen, and asked myself a question that would consume the next several months of my life. Why would the HOA president steal packages from the people she was supposed to protect? I decided to confront Victoria directly. Not aggressively, not with accusations, just a simple question from a concerned resident. I found her the next afternoon at the community mailbox area, clipboard in hand as always, inspecting the landscaping around the postal station. I approached with a neutral expression and asked if she had a moment. "Of course, Mr. Cole," she said, turning to face me with practiced warmth. "What can I do for you?" I explained that I'd lost 3 packages in the past month, all confirmed delivered by tracking. All vanished from my porch. I asked if other residents had reported similar issues, if there was a pattern the HOA was aware of. Her expression never changed, but her fingers tightened around the clipboard, knuckles whitening slightly. "Package theft is a national problem," she said smoothly. "It's not something the HOA can control. Have you considered upgrading to a locking mailbox? We have a preferred vendor who offers them for $800. I pressed further, mentioning that my camera footage had been corrupted during the exact time frame of the deliveries. Victoria's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Technology can be unreliable. Mr. Cole, perhaps you should check your settings. These smart devices aren't always as smart as they claim." There was something in her tone that felt like a warning wrapped in helpfulness. Before I could respond, she glanced at her watch and excused herself, citing a board meeting. As she walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement, I noticed she didn't offer any follow-up, didn't suggest filing a community report, didn't express any concern for a resident's lost property. She simply dismissed the problem as mine to solve. That night, I replayed our conversation and realized something important. Victoria hadn't asked what was in the packages. She hadn't asked their value or when exactly they disappeared. She already knew. I started talking to my neighbors, casually at first, just friendly conversations over fences and in driveways. Ruth Mallory was the first to open up, 70 years old, a widow who'd lived in Maplewood Estates for 15 years. We spoke on her front porch while she watered her flowers. "I've lost at least 10 packages in the last year," she told me quietly, glancing around as if someone might overhear. "Birthday gifts for my grandchildren, medications, things I ordered online because it's hard for me to get to the stores." When I asked if she'd reported it to the HOA, her face tightened. "I mentioned it once at a meeting. Victoria said she'd look into it. The next week, I received a violation notice for my garden hose being visible from the street. $200 fine." Ruth shook her head slowly. "I learned not to complain after that." Henry Atwood, 2 doors down, confirmed Ruth's experience with fewer words but equal frustration. His blood pressure medication had vanished twice from mail-order deliveries. "Cost me $300 in emergency refills," he said. "I keep records of everything, but when I brought it up to the board, suddenly my trash cans were in the wrong position. My car was parked at the wrong angle." His wife appeared at the door and quickly called him inside. Even she seemed nervous about being seen discussing this. Mira Dalton filled in the broader picture. 45. Worked in marketing. Sharp and observant. She'd been watching Victoria's operation for 6 years. "It's not random theft," Mira explained over coffee at her kitchen table. "It's a system. Victoria has loyalists on the board. The treasurer, the secretary do whatever she says. Anyone who questions her gets buried in violations until they either pay up and shut up, or sell and move out. 4 families have left since I've been here. She showed me screenshots of unanswered complaints, violation notices arriving within days of each one. When I asked why no one had gone to the authorities, Mira shrugged. And say what, we don't have proof, just patterns. I spent that weekend building a spreadsheet. Every name, every missing package, every retaliatory violation. The numbers were staggering. 12 households had reported losses to me in just a few days of asking. 47 packages minimum over the past 12 months, with an estimated value exceeding $8,000. Victoria had built a perfect closed loop, using her authority to suppress anyone who might expose her. I documented everything, cross-referencing dates, noting correlations. By Sunday night, I had a 20-page file that painted a clear picture of systematic abuse. But Mira was right. Patterns weren't proof. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. I needed to catch Victoria in the act. 3 days after my conversation with Victoria, the first retaliation arrived, a formal notice from the HOA, printed on official letterhead, citing a violation of community standards. Trash receptacle visible from street after 7 p.m. in violation of Section 4.3 of the Community Covenant. Fine $150. I checked my security footage for that evening. My trash can had been inside the garage by 6:45. The footage was clear, uninterrupted, and time-stamped. Either someone had moved my trash can after I went inside, or the violation was completely fabricated. I suspected the latter. Victoria was sending a message, letting me know she was aware of my inquiries, but she'd miscalculated. I wasn't Ruth, afraid of fines and social pressure. I wasn't Henry, worried about keeping the peace. I was an engineer. I solved problems systematically, and Victoria Langford had just become my most important problem to solve. That same night, I noticed something unusual. From my upstairs window, I had a partial view of Victoria's backyard. Around 9 p.m., I saw her walking toward a storage shed behind her house, a structure I'd never paid attention to before. She unlocked the door, disappeared inside, and the light clicked on. Through the narrow gap in the door, I could see shelves, and on those shelves, stacked 3 or 4 high, were cardboard boxes, dozens of them. Some had shipping labels still attached, logos I recognized from online retailers, and Postal Service markings visible even from this distance. I grabbed my camera with the telephoto lens and captured what I could. The images were grainy, taken through a window at night, but they showed enough. Victoria Langford wasn't just stealing packages, she was hoarding them. The question now wasn't whether she was guilty. It was how to prove it in a way she couldn't dismiss, deny, or retaliate against. I spent the following weekend doing what I do best. Research. Systematic, thorough, methodical research. I started with state laws on theft, expecting to find something applicable to Victoria's activities. What I discovered instead changed everything. Package theft wasn't just a local crime. When items are delivered through the United States Postal Service, taking them becomes a federal offense. I found the statute buried in Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1708. The language was unambiguous. Whoever steals, takes, or abstracts any letter, postal card, package, bag, or mail from any post office, mail receptacle, or authorized depository, or from a letter or mail carrier, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 5 years, or both. 5 years. Federal prison, not county jail, not probation, not a slap on the wrist. Victoria Langford wasn't just violating HOA ethics. She was committing a felony that could land her in a federal penitentiary. The realization shifted my entire perspective. This wasn't about neighborhood disputes or petty theft anymore. This was about federal law enforcement jurisdiction, about crimes that the FBI and postal inspectors took seriously. I dug deeper into enforcement mechanisms and discovered the United States Postal Inspection Service, one of the oldest law enforcement agencies in the country. Their sole mission was to protect the mail system and investigate postal crimes. They had their own investigators, their own prosecutors, their own courtrooms. They didn't care about HOA politics or community dynamics. They cared about evidence, documentation, and criminal violations. For the first time since my packages started disappearing, I felt like I had found the right weapon. Not violence, not confrontation, but process. Federal process. the kind that Victoria Langford couldn't intimidate or fine into silence. I called the USPIS hotline on Monday morning. A recorded message walked me through the options, and I selected the one for reporting mail theft. After a brief hold, a human voice came on the line. I explained my situation calmly, presenting the facts without emotion. 3 personal packages are missing: corrupted camera footage, video evidence of a figure matching the description of a known individual taking a package from my porch, a pattern of similar thefts affecting at least 12 households in the same community. The agent on the phone listened without interruption, then asked several pointed questions. Did I have tracking confirmations? Yes. Did I have the video file preserved? Yes. Did I have contact information for other victims willing to provide statements? Yes. She gave me a case number and an email address for submitting documentation. We take mail theft seriously, Mr. Cole, she said, especially when there's evidence of a pattern. Submit everything you have. An inspector will review and follow up. The next step was building a comprehensive evidence package. I contacted Ruth, Henry, and Mira, explaining that I'd found a path forward through federal channels. Ruth was hesitant at first, worried about retaliation, but when I explained that postal inspectors operated outside Victoria's sphere of influence, she agreed to provide a written statement. Henry gave me copies of his meticulous records, dates and dollar amounts stretching back 18 months. Mira connected me with 3 other neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up before. Within a week, I had statements from 8 households documenting 31 confirmed missing packages with postal tracking. Combined with my own losses and the video evidence, the file was substantial. I organized everything chronologically, created a summary document highlighting the pattern, and submitted it all to the USPIS email address. The confirmation reply came within 24 hours. Your submission has been received and assigned to Postal Inspector Aria Monroe. You will be contacted within 10 business days. While waiting for the federal response, I decided to approach Jonah Whitaker. The mysterious neighbor across the street had been hovering at the edge of my investigation since the beginning. His frequent government-labeled packages, Victoria's unusual interest in his mailbox, and his deliberate avoidance of her presence. Something about his situation felt different from the rest of us. I knocked on his door on a Tuesday evening, introducing myself as a neighbor who'd been dealing with package theft. Jonah studied me through the half-open door for a long moment before stepping aside to let me in. His house was sparse, functional, with no personal photographs or decorations. The living room contained a desk covered in technical manuals and a computer setup that looked more sophisticated than anything a casual user would need. "You're the one asking questions," he said. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. I explained what I'd discovered about Victoria, the pattern of theft, the federal complaint I'd filed. Jonah listened without expression, arms crossed, leaning against his kitchen counter. When I finished, he was quiet for several seconds. Then he spoke, choosing his words carefully. "I work as a contractor for a government agency. I can't tell you which one. Part of my job involves receiving materials through the mail. Prototypes, documentation, components for testing. Nothing classified at the highest levels, but still government property with tracking requirements." He paused, uncrossing his arms. "Last month, I had a package go missing. Tracking said delivered, but it never reached my hands. I assumed it was a shipping error and reported it through internal channels. But if what you're saying is true, if she took it..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The implication hung in the air between us like a held breath. I asked what would happen if a government package was confirmed stolen by a civilian. Jonah's expression hardened. "It depends on what was in it. But at minimum, it triggers an investigation by the agency that sent it. They don't file complaints through normal channels. They have their own people, their own procedures." He walked to his window and looked out at the quiet street, at Victoria's house visible in the distance. "If she took what I think she took, she has no idea what she's done. The people who come asking about government property don't send letters. They don't schedule appointments. They just show up." As if on cue, a sound drifted through the evening air, distant, rhythmic, mechanical. I looked up instinctively, and through Jonah's window, I saw a helicopter crossing the horizon toward downtown. Jonah watched it too, his jaw tight. "That's not them," he said quietly. "But when they do come, Mr. Cole, it won't be subtle, and she won't see it coming until it's already too late." I left Jonah's house with more questions than answers. but also with a new understanding of the stakes involved. Victoria had been stealing from ordinary residents for years, protected by her position and her willingness to retaliate against anyone who complained. She'd grown comfortable, confident, careless. Somewhere along the line, she'd taken something that didn't belong to the neighborhood dispute category, something that belonged to people with resources far beyond an HOA board. I didn't know exactly what Jonah's missing package contained, but I knew one thing with certainty. Victoria Langford had built her little kingdom on the assumption that no one could touch her. She was about to discover how wrong that assumption was. The federal complaint was filed, but I knew bureaucracy moved slowly. Postal Inspector Monroe had given me a 10-day window for follow-up, which meant 10 days of waiting while Victoria continued operating freely. I wasn't willing to sit idle. The evidence I had submitted was substantial, but circumstantial. Patterns, statements, correlations. What I needed was something undeniable. Direct footage of Victoria taking a package, clear enough to identify her face, her ring, and her deliberate action. My original Ring camera had proven unreliable, whether through technical failure or deliberate interference. So I decided to build a better trap. I ordered a Covert camera system online, the kind used for home security in high-risk situations. It arrived 3 days later, disguised as a motion sensor porch light. The camera inside was invisible to casual inspection, recorded in high definition, and uploaded directly to encrypted cloud storage. No local files to corrupt, no wireless signal to jam. Victoria could walk right past it and never know she was being filmed. I installed the device on a Saturday morning, positioning it at the corner of my roof where it had a clear view of my entire front porch and the walkway leading to the street. The original Ring camera stayed in place, still functional, still visible. If Victoria had been disabling it remotely, she would have seen it was still there and assumed her method still worked. The Covert camera would capture what she thought she was hiding. That afternoon, I placed an order with an online retailer, a small item, inexpensive, shipped with full tracking. The package itself didn't matter. What mattered was that it would arrive with a delivery confirmation, sit on my porch, and wait for someone to take it. I scheduled myself to be away from home during the delivery window. Everything was in place. All I needed was patience and a thief who had grown too comfortable with her own impunity while waiting for the trap to spring. Mira Dalton connected me with someone who could help on the legal front. Attorney Meredith Shaw specialized in consumer protection and HOA disputes, with a particular interest in cases involving abuse of power. We met at her downtown office, a modest space filled with filing cabinets and legal volumes. I brought my complete documentation, the spreadsheet, the statements, and the timeline of retaliatory violations. She reviewed everything in silence for nearly 20 minutes before looking up. "You've done impressive work, Mr. Cole. Most people who come to me with HOA complaints have emotions and grievances. You have data." She closed the folder and leaned back. "The federal complaint is the right move for the criminal side, but there's also a civil path. If we can prove Victoria personally engaged in theft and used her HOA position to retaliate against victims, we can sue her individually and potentially the board for negligent oversight." I asked what we needed to make that case bulletproof. Meredith was direct. Video evidence of her taking a package. Clear, identifiable, time-stamped. Your pattern analysis is compelling, but defense attorneys love reasonable doubt. They'll argue coincidence, misidentification, and technical errors. A video of Victoria Langford physically removing a package from your property eliminates all of that. She paused, considering something. There's another angle worth exploring. HOA finances. If Victoria has been stealing packages for years, she's either keeping the items or selling them. Either way, there might be a money trail. Does anyone have access to the HOA financial records? I mentioned Henry Atwood, the retired accountant who kept meticulous records of his own. Meredith nodded. Ask him to look into the HOA budget. Specifically, any line items that seem inflated or vague. Maintenance supplies, administrative expenses, anything that could hide irregular income or expenditures. Financial fraud often travels alongside other crimes. The bait package arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. Tracking confirmation hit my phone at 3:22 p.m. I was at a coffee shop 10 minutes away, watching the Covert camera feed on my laptop through a secure connection. The footage showed the delivery driver placing a small box on my porch, taking a photo for confirmation, and returning to his truck. The box sat there, clearly visible. A target waiting for its hunter. I ordered another coffee and settled in to watch. For 2 hours, nothing happened. A neighbor walked by with a dog. A car drove past. The afternoon sun shifted across my porch, creating long shadows. At 4:47 p.m., movement appeared at the edge of the frame. A figure approached from the direction of the community mailbox area. Gray blazer, dark slacks, hair perfectly styled. Victoria Langford walked up my driveway with the confidence of someone who owned the street. She paused at the edge of my porch and looked around, a casual surveillance sweep that had probably become second nature. Her eyes lingered on the Ring camera for a moment, and she seemed satisfied with what she saw. Then she stepped forward, bent down, and picked up the package. She didn't rush. She didn't look nervous. She examined the shipping label briefly, tucked the box under her arm, and walked away at the same unhurried pace. The entire theft took less than 30 seconds. The covert camera captured every moment in perfect clarity. Her face, her posture, her hands. The gold ring with the red stone glinting in the late afternoon light. The deliberate, practiced motion of someone who had done this dozens of times before. I saved the footage to 3 separate locations, encrypted each copy, and sent one directly to Attorney Shaw. Then I called Postal Inspector Monroe. She answered on the second ring. I identified myself by case number and told her I had new evidence. Direct video footage of the subject taking a package from my property. Clear facial identification. Timestamp matching. Delivery confirmation. The complete sequence from approach to departure. There was a pause on the line. The sound of typing. Can you upload that to the secure portal I sent you? I confirmed I could. Do it now. I'll review it within the hour and call you back. True to her word, Monroe called back 53 minutes later. Her tone had shifted from professional interest to active engagement. Mr. Cole, based on this footage and your previous submissions, we're opening a formal investigation. I need you to understand something important. Do not confront the subject. Do not discuss this investigation with anyone outside your immediate witness group. Let us handle it from here. I agreed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The machinery of federal law enforcement had started turning. What I didn't know at the time was that another report had been filed that same week. Jonah Whitaker, my quiet neighbor with the government packages, had escalated his missing item through internal channels. His report didn't go to the Postal Inspection Service. It went to the agency that had sent the package in the first place. And when government property goes missing, especially property related to sensitive projects, the response doesn't come through normal mail. It comes faster, louder, and with significantly more authority. Somewhere in a federal building, 2 separate investigations were about to converge on the same target. Victoria Langford was still attending board meetings, still issuing violation notices, still walking the neighborhood with her clipboard and her practiced smile. She had no idea that the walls were closing in from multiple directions, or that the next knock on her door wouldn't come from a neighbor with a complaint. It would come from people who didn't knock at all. 2 weeks after I submitted the video evidence to Postal Inspector Monroe, Victoria Langford launched her counterattack. It started with a single envelope in my mailbox. Official HOA letterhead, the kind of formal notice I'd learned to recognize. But this was just the opening salvo. Over the next 7 days, I received 4 separate violation notices, each more absurd than the last. The first cited my lawn height exceeding 3 inches, a measurement I tested myself with a ruler and found to be exactly 2 1/4. The second claimed I had made unauthorized modifications to my exterior lighting, referring to the covert camera I'd installed, which was designed to be invisible to casual inspection. Either someone had tipped Victoria off, or she was simply guessing and hoping to rattle me. The third notice alleged my vehicle had been parked on the driveway overnight, which wasn't against any rule I could find in the covenant. The fourth was the most brazen, a noise complaint for disturbance after 10 p.m. I had been asleep by 9. Total fines demanded $1,200. I documented each notice meticulously, photographing the envelopes, the postmarks, and the exact wording. For each alleged violation, I gathered counter-evidence, time-stamped photos of my lawn with the ruler visible, security footage showing my car in the garage overnight. My own sleep tracker data proves I hadn't been awake, let alone making noise. Attorney Meredith Shaw added every notice to our growing file. "This is textbook retaliation," she said during our phone call. "She's escalating because she feels threatened. The timing isn't coincidental. She knows you're the one asking questions, and she's trying to bury you in fines and paperwork. I asked if this changed our legal strategy. Meredith's voice carried a note of satisfaction. It strengthens it considerably. Every false violation she issues is another count of harassment. Another piece of evidence showing pattern and intent. Let her keep digging her own grave. Victoria didn't limit her campaign to official channels. The following week, she convened an emergency HOA meeting under the pretense of discussing community security concerns. I attended, sitting in the back row of the community center, with Ruth Mallory on one side and Myra Dalton on the other. The room held about 30 residents, most of whom looked confused about why they'd been summoned on a Thursday evening. Victoria stood at the front podium, dressed in a navy blazer, her demeanor radiating authority and concern. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," she began, her voice carrying that honeyed tone I'd grown to distrust. "I've called this meeting because there have been some troubling developments in our community. Certain individuals have been engaging in behavior that threatens the harmony and security we've worked so hard to build." She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. Her eyes found mine twice during her speech, brief glances that carried unmistakable meaning. The presentation continued for 20 minutes. Victoria spoke about outside influences, disrupting community cohesion. She mentioned residents who ask too many questions and spread unfounded rumors. She proposed a security enhancement plan costing $25,000, funded by a 20% increase in HOA fees, which would include new cameras throughout the neighborhood controlled exclusively by the board. "For everyone's protection," she explained. A few residents nodded along, conditioned by years of following Victoria's lead, but I noticed others shifting uncomfortably, exchanging glances. The mood in the room wasn't unanimous support anymore. There were cracks forming, doubts taking root. When Victoria asked for questions, Henry Atwood raised his hand. "What specifically are these security concerns you're referring to?" Victoria's smile tightened. "I can't discuss ongoing matters in a public forum, Henry. Suffice to say, the board is handling it." Henry sat back down, but his expression said he wasn't satisfied. Neither were several others around him. After the meeting, Ruth pulled me aside in the parking lot. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. "I got a notice today," she said quietly. "Landscaping violation. They're saying my chrysanthemums are dying and creating an eyesore. $300 fine." I felt my jaw clench. Ruth's garden was her pride and joy, meticulously maintained despite her age and limited mobility. The idea that her flowers constituted a violation was absurd, and we both knew it. "She knows I've been talking to you," Ruth continued, her voice wavering. "She's punishing me for it." I put a hand on her shoulder and told her to document everything, take photos, and keep copies. I promised her this wouldn't last forever, that the people looking into Victoria operated beyond her reach. Ruth nodded, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. Victoria wasn't just threatening me anymore. She was going after anyone who stood with me. The online attack came 3 days later. Mira forwarded me a screenshot from the neighborhood social media platform, a post from an anonymous account warning residents about suspicious activity in Maplewood Estates. The post described someone installing hidden surveillance equipment and interrogating neighbors about private HOA matters. It urged residents to report any unusual behavior to the board immediately and to be cautious about sharing information with newcomers who may have ulterior motives. The comments section had devolved into speculation and accusation. Several people guessed it was referring to me, though no one used my name directly. A few defended the anonymous poster's concerns. Others questioned the timing and the vague language. Mira called me that evening, her voice tight with anger. "She's trying to isolate you, turn the community against you before anyone figures out what's really going on. This is her playbook. Adrian, I've seen her do it before. I won't pretend the attacks didn't affect me. There were moments that week when I questioned whether this fight was worth it. The fines, the social pressure, the constant feeling of being watched and judged. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of the evidence locked in my cloud storage. The video of Victoria calmly stealing from my porch. The statements from 8 households. The federal investigation is slowly building momentum. She could issue all the violations she wanted. She could turn half the neighborhood against me. None of it would change what I had documented. None of it would stop what was coming. I kept my head down, responded to nothing publicly, and let Attorney Shaw handle the legal responses to each fraudulent fine. Silence was my strategy. Patience was my weapon. Victoria was expending energy and resources trying to intimidate me, unaware that every action she took was being recorded, cataloged, and added to the case against her. The knock on my door came late on a Friday night, just past 11. I opened it to find Jonah Whitaker standing on my porch, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't sit down, just stood in my living room, arms crossed, choosing his words carefully. "I got confirmation today. The package I reported missing, the one I told you about, it contained a prototype component for an aerospace project, government-funded, controlled technology, value $340,000. The number hung in the air between us. I asked what that meant for Victoria. Jonah's eyes met mine, hard and certain. "It means this isn't about HOA violations anymore. It means people with much bigger authority than postal inspectors are now involved. And when they come for her, they won't send a letter." Outside, somewhere in the distance, I heard the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades cutting through the night air. Jonah glanced toward the window, then back at me. "She has no idea what she's woken up." The call from Postal Inspector Aria Monroe came on a Wednesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after I had submitted the video evidence. Her voice carried a different weight than in our previous conversations, less routine, more urgent. "Mr. Cole, I wanted to update you personally. We've completed our initial review and corroborated your evidence with multiple sources. Based on the documentation you provided and our own investigation, we have sufficient grounds to request a search warrant for Ms. Langford's property." I felt my pulse quicken, but kept my voice steady, asking when the warrant would be executed. There was a pause on the line, the kind that suggested complications. "That's where things get interesting," Monroe continued. "Another federal agency has expressed interest in this case. They have priority jurisdiction based on the nature of certain items potentially involved. We're coordinating with them, which means the timeline has shifted. I can't give you specifics, but I want you to understand that this is no longer just a mail theft investigation." I asked what that meant for my role in the process. Monroe was careful with her words. "It means you should continue documenting any new incidents, but avoid any confrontation with the subject. It means the scope of this investigation has expanded beyond what either of us initially anticipated. And it means that when action is taken, it may look different than a standard postal inspection operation." She paused again. "You've done exceptional work, Mr. Cole. The evidence package you assembled is one of the most comprehensive I've seen from a civilian complainant. Whatever happens next, you should know that your diligence made this possible." I thanked her and asked if there was anything else I should do to prepare. Her response was simple. "Be ready. When this moves, it will move fast." The line went dead, and I sat in my home office staring at the phone, processing what I'd just heard. Another federal agency, priority jurisdiction. Something in Victoria's stolen hoard had attracted attention far beyond neighborhood theft. That afternoon, I met with attorney Meredith Shaw at her office to review our complete case file. She had organized everything into a thick binder, tabbed and indexed with the precision of someone preparing for trial. "Let's walk through what we have," she said, opening to the first section. 47 documented missing packages from 15 households. Estimated value exceeding $8,400. Video evidence clearly showing Victoria Langford removing a package from your property. Written statements from 8 victims willing to testify. 12 retaliatory violation notices were issued against you and 2 other complainants, all with documented counter-evidence proving they were fraudulent. She flipped through several more tabs. Financial irregularities in HOA records that Henry Atwood identified, including a maintenance supply budget of $12,000 annually, with no corresponding receipts or vendor contracts. And now, confirmation from federal authorities that a formal investigation is underway. She closed the binder and looked at me directly. "This is enough for criminal prosecution on multiple counts and a civil suit that could bankrupt her personally." I asked about the complications Monroe had mentioned. The other agency involvement? Meredith nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting the question. "I received a call this morning from someone who identified himself as a federal liaison officer. He asked about our case timeline and whether we had any documentation related to government property. I told him everything we had was already submitted to USPS. She leaned forward slightly. "Adrian, I've been practicing law for 18 years. I've handled HOA disputes, consumer fraud, and even a few federal cases. I've never had a liaison officer call me directly about a mail theft investigation. Whatever Victoria took from your neighbor, Jonah, it's something that matters to people with significant resources. This case has grown beyond a community dispute. We're now part of something larger. I asked if that changed our strategy. Meredith shook her head. Our civil case remains the same, but I suspect the criminal side is about to escalate dramatically. When federal agencies coordinate, they don't do it quietly. Victoria, meanwhile, continued operating as if nothing had changed. 2 days after my conversation with Monroe, an email arrived in my inbox from the HOA board announcing the annual community meeting scheduled for Saturday afternoon. The message bore Victoria's unmistakable tone, confident and commanding. Dear Maplewood Estates residents, please join us this Saturday at 2 p.m. in the community center for our annual meeting. We will be discussing important updates to our security infrastructure and voting on proposed amendments to the community covenant. Your presence is essential as we work together to maintain the excellence that defines our neighborhood. Light refreshments will be provided. I read the email twice, marveling at the audacity. Victoria was planning to stand before the community and propose more control, more surveillance, more fees, completely unaware that her empire was about to collapse. This would be her last performance as HOA president, and she didn't even know the curtain was falling. The night before the meeting, I gathered our alliance at Ruth Mallory's house. It was safer than my place, less likely to draw Victoria's attention. Ruth had made coffee and set out cookies, her hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. Henry Atwood arrived first, carrying a folder of financial documents he'd been analyzing. Mira Dalton came next, followed by George Pennington and Sylvia Rhodes, 2 other residents who had quietly joined our cause after learning about the investigation. We arranged ourselves in Ruth's living room, while Attorney Shaw joined via video call on my laptop, her face filling the screen with professional composure. Thank you all for being here, I began. Tomorrow is the day we've been working toward, but I want to make sure everyone understands what might happen and what role each of you should play. Meredith took over from there, explaining the legal landscape, the potential outcomes, and the importance of remaining calm regardless of what unfolded. After the briefing, Meredith added something that made the room go quiet. I should tell you that I'll be attending tomorrow's meeting in person, but there may be others present as well. People who weren't invited through normal channels. Ruth asked who she meant. Meredith's expression remained neutral, but there was a glint in her eyes. Federal investigators don't typically announce their arrival, but based on the conversations I've had this week, I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow's meeting has some unexpected guests. If that happens, stay seated, stay quiet, and let them do their job. The weight of her words settled over the room. This wasn't just a community confrontation anymore. This was the convergence of everything we'd built, everything we'd documented, everything Victoria had done, thinking no one was watching. After everyone left, I walked across the street to Jonah Whitaker's house. I wanted to invite him to the meeting, to have him there when Victoria finally faced consequences for what she'd stolen from him. But when I knocked on his door, no one answered. The lights inside were off. His car was parked in the garage, visible through the small window, but the house felt empty, deliberately so. I left a note in his mailbox and walked back home, uneasy. As I reached my porch, movement caught my eye. A black SUV was parked at the corner of Jonah's street, engine off, windows tinted too dark to see inside. I watched it for several minutes. No one got in or out. It just sat there, waiting. Around 11 p.m., I checked again from my upstairs window. The SUV was gone, but I noticed Jonah's garage light had turned on briefly before switching off again. Someone was there, coordinating something I wasn't supposed to see. Jonah wasn't absent. He was being positioned. And whatever was coming tomorrow, it was bigger than any of us had imagined. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to sleep, knowing that by this time tomorrow, everything would be different. Saturday arrived with cloudless skies and a stillness in the air that felt almost theatrical. I drove to the community center at 1:30, wanting to arrive early enough to secure a seat with clear sight lines to both the podium and the exits. The parking lot was already half full when I pulled in, residents trickling toward the entrance in small groups, some chatting casually, others looking uncertain about why this meeting felt different. I spotted Ruth Mallory near the front doors, wearing a floral dress she'd told me was her courage outfit, the one she wore when she needed to feel strong. Henry Atwood stood beside her, folder tucked under his arm, his accountant's eyes scanning the crowd with quiet assessment. Mira Dalton caught my gaze from across the lot and gave me a slight nod. Our alliance was in position. Whatever happened next, we wouldn't face it alone. The community center was a modest building, single story, with a main hall that could hold about 60 people in folding chairs. Victoria had arranged the space like a corporate presentation, with a podium at the front, a projection screen behind it, and neat rows of seating facing forward. She stood near the entrance as residents filed in, greeting each one with practiced warmth, shaking hands, touching shoulders, projecting the image of a leader who cared deeply about her community. When I walked past her, she didn't offer her hand. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, cold and measuring, before she turned to welcome someone else. I took a seat in the fourth row, close enough to see her face clearly, but far enough back to observe the room. Ruth sat to my left, Henry to my right. Mira positioned herself near the back exit, her phone already recording. Attorney Meredith Shaw arrived last, taking a seat in the front row with a briefcase at her feet. Her presence a silent statement that legal consequences were now in play. By 2 o'clock, approximately 35 residents had gathered, and Victoria stepped behind the podium to begin. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice amplified by a small microphone clipped to her blazer. "As many of you know, our community has faced some challenges recently. Today, I want to present a comprehensive security enhancement plan that will protect Maplewood Estates for years to come." She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her displayed a polished slide titled Security Enhancement Plan 2025. The proposal outlined new camera systems, upgraded gate controls, and expanded board authority to monitor suspicious activities. Total cost $25,000, funded by a 20% increase in HOA fees. Victoria narrated each slide with the confidence of someone who had never been seriously challenged, pausing occasionally to smile at supportive faces in the audience. I waited until she finished the main presentation before raising my hand. Victoria's expression flickered almost imperceptibly when she saw my hand go up, but she recovered quickly. "Yes, Mr. Cole, do you have a question?" I stood so the room could see me clearly. "I do have a question, but it's not about security cameras. It's about security for our packages." A murmur rippled through the audience. Victoria's smile remained fixed, but her posture stiffened. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said carefully. "I have data showing that 47 packages have gone missing in this community over the past 12 months. I continued, keeping my voice calm and factual. 15 households affected. The estimated value over $8,000. Many of these thefts occurred during specific time frames when security footage was conveniently corrupted or unavailable." The murmur grew louder. Several residents turned to look at each other, recognition dawning on faces that had experienced the same losses but never connected them to a pattern. Victoria attempted to regain control. "Package theft is a national issue. Mr. Cole, it's not something the HOA can be held responsible for." That was when Ruth Mallory stood up beside me, her voice thin but steady. "I've lost 10 packages in the past year, birthday gifts for my grandchildren. When I mentioned it at a meeting last spring, I received a violation notice the following week." Henry Atwood rose next. "My prescription medications disappeared twice. I have documentation of every incident, including the dates I reported them and the retaliatory fines that followed." More voices joined in, residents who had been silent for years suddenly finding the courage to speak. George Pennington described losing electronics he'd ordered for his home office. Sylvia Rhodes mentioned Christmas presents that never arrived. The careful order Victoria had maintained for 8 years was crumbling in real time, and I watched her face cycle through surprise, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. Then I heard it, distant at first, a rhythmic thumping that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Thwap, thwap, thwap. The sound grew louder, closer, until the windows of the community center began to vibrate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the ceiling, then toward the windows. Through the glass, I saw it descending, a black helicopter with no visible markings, kicking up dust and debris as it landed on the grass field adjacent to the parking lot. The rotor wash bent nearby trees and sent loose papers swirling through the air. For a moment, no one moved. We all just watched, frozen by the surreal intrusion of something so massive and unexpected into our quiet suburban meeting. Victoria's face had gone pale, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. She didn't know what was coming, but some instinct told her it was coming for her. The helicopter's engine powered down, and 4 figures emerged from the cabin. They wore dark tactical vests over civilian clothes, badges visible on chains around their necks. They moved with purpose, crossing the parking lot in formation, heading directly for the community center entrance. The lead figure was a woman, tall and composed, with short dark hair and an expression that conveyed absolute authority. She pushed through the main doors and scanned the room until her eyes found Victoria behind the podium. The silence in the hall was total. No one breathed. The woman walked down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing in the stillness, and stopped about 10 feet from where Victoria stood. Victoria Langford. Her voice was clear, unhurried, designed to carry. Victoria swallowed visibly. Yes. Who are you? What is this? The woman reached into her vest and produced a leather credential case, flipping it open to reveal a federal badge. I'm Agent Celine Foster. We're investigating the theft of a package containing government property that was delivered to this community and never reached its intended recipient. The room erupted in whispers, but Agent Foster ignored them, keeping her focus locked on Victoria. The item in question is a prototype component for a federally funded aerospace project, controlled technology, estimated value $340,000. The number landed like a physical blow. I heard gasps from multiple directions. Victoria's hand gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. I don't know what you're talking about, she managed, but her voice had lost all its honey, all its command. Agent Foster remained unmoved. We have evidence indicating that you have been systematically stealing packages from residents of this community for an extended period. We have video documentation, witness statements, and tracking records. We also have a warrant to search your residence and the storage structure on your property. She nodded to the agents behind her, who moved toward Victoria with handcuffs visible. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. What happened next was something I'll never forget. Victoria Langford, the woman who had controlled this neighborhood through intimidation and authority for 8 years, completely unraveled. This is a mistake, she said, her voice rising. I was just checking packages, making sure they weren't against community regulations. I didn't steal anything. He set me up, she pointed at me, her finger trembling with rage. He's been conspiring against me since he moved here. He planted evidence. He turned everyone against me. Agent Foster didn't even glance in my direction. Ma'am, we conducted our own investigation independent of any civilian complaints. The evidence against you comes from multiple federal sources. This isn't about neighborhood disputes anymore. She gestured to the agents, who stepped forward and guided Victoria's hands behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was audible throughout the silent room. Victoria was still protesting as they led her toward the exit, her words becoming less coherent, her carefully maintained image dissolving with every step. As she passed my row, Victoria turned her head and locked eyes with me one final time. There was hatred there, but also something else. Disbelief. She genuinely hadn't seen this coming. She had spent so long operating without consequences that she'd forgotten consequences were possible. I held her gaze without flinching, without speaking. There was nothing left to say. The agents escorted her out the front doors, past the stunned residents, toward the black SUV that had appeared alongside the helicopter. Camera phones were recording from every angle, capturing the moment that would soon spread across the internet. Victoria Langford, HOA president, was being led away in handcuffs while a federal helicopter idled on the community lawn. It was the kind of scene that seemed impossible until you watched it happen. I felt a presence beside me and turned to find Jonah Whitaker standing there. He must have entered through the back during the chaos, positioning himself to witness the conclusion of what his missing package had set in motion. His expression was unreadable, but there was a slight nod, an acknowledgement between us that needed no words. I told you, he said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear. They don't knock. Outside, the helicopter's rotors began spinning again, preparing for departure. The SUV carrying Victoria pulled away, followed by another vehicle I hadn't noticed arriving. Within minutes, the only evidence of what had happened was the flattened grass where the helicopter had landed, and the shell-shocked faces of 35 residents who had just watched their HOA president get arrested by federal agents. Ruth Mallory reached over and squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered. I squeezed back, watching the helicopter rise into the cloudless sky. "Almost," I said. "There's still the matter of justice." The search of Victoria Langford's property took 6 hours. Federal agents, accompanied by postal inspectors and local law enforcement, methodically documented everything they found. I wasn't present for the search itself, but Attorney Meredith Shaw received a preliminary report the following week and shared the details with me during a phone call. The storage shed behind Victoria's house contained 83 packages in various states. Some were still sealed, labels intact, waiting to be opened. Others had been emptied, their contents presumably sold or kept. The oldest package dated back nearly 4 years, a testament to how long Victoria had been operating without fear of discovery. Among the items recovered was Jonah Whitaker's missing prototype, still in its original packaging. Tucked beneath a pile of clothing Victoria had apparently stolen from someone's online shopping order. She had no idea what she possessed. To her, it was just another box with potential value. That ignorance had cost her everything. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Federal charges came first, filed within 2 weeks of the arrest. 18 U.S.C., Section 1708. Theft of mail, multiple counts. 18 U.S.C., Section 641. Theft of government property. 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Wire fraud, stemming from evidence that Victoria had been selling stolen goods through online auction platforms under a fake identity for at least 3 years, generating an estimated $15,000 in illegal income. State charges followed shortly after: grand larceny, criminal harassment, abuse of fiduciary duty as an HOA officer. The combined weight of federal and state prosecution left Victoria with few options. Her attorney negotiated a plea agreement that avoided a full trial, but guaranteed significant consequences: 4 years in federal prison, 2 years state sentence to run concurrently, $47,000 in restitution to victims, and a lifetime ban from serving in any homeowners association capacity in any jurisdiction. The judge accepted the plea on a Thursday morning in late spring. I attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the back row of the courtroom, watching Victoria stand before the bench in an orange jumpsuit, her perfectly styled hair now pulled back in a simple ponytail, her commanding presence reduced to quiet compliance. The video of the helicopter landing went viral within hours of the arrest. Someone in the community center had captured the entire sequence, from the first sound of rotors to Victoria being led away in handcuffs, and uploaded it with the caption, "HOA President Arrested by Feds for Stealing Packages." Within a week, it had accumulated over 2 million views across various platforms. News outlets picked up the story, running segments about HOA overreach and the dangers of unchecked community authority. Reporters reached out to me for interviews, but I declined every request. This wasn't about personal recognition. It was about justice, about proving that systems could work when ordinary people refused to be intimidated. I gave a single statement through Attorney Shaw, thanking the postal inspectors and federal agents for their thorough work, and encouraging anyone experiencing similar abuse to document everything and contact the appropriate authorities. That was enough. The story spoke for itself. The aftermath transformed Maplewood Estates in ways I hadn't anticipated. The entire HOA board resigned within a month of Victoria's arrest, unwilling to face the scrutiny that now accompanied their positions. A special election was held to form a new board, and for the first time in nearly a decade, there was genuine competition for leadership. Ruth Mallory, the 70-year-old widow who had been afraid to complain about her missing packages, was nominated by a group of residents who had witnessed her courage at the final meeting. She won with 73% of the vote, becoming the new president of an organization she had once feared. Her first official act was to abolish the violation fine structure that Victoria had weaponized, replacing it with a mediation process that prioritized communication over punishment. Her second act was to hire an independent auditor to review all HOA finances from the past 8 years. The audit revealed additional irregularities that led to the recovery of nearly $20,000 in misallocated funds. 3 months after the sentencing, Jonah Whitaker invited me to dinner at his house. It was the first time I'd been inside since that evening, when he'd warned me about what was coming. The space felt different now, less guarded, as if a tension I hadn't fully recognized had finally released, over grilled steaks and a surprisingly good bottle of wine. Jonah told me more about himself than he had in all our previous conversations combined. He'd worked in aerospace engineering for 22 years, the last 8 as an independent contractor for projects he still couldn't fully describe. The prototype Victoria had stolen was a component for a satellite navigation system, not classified in the traditional sense, but controlled under technology export regulations. Its disappearance had triggered automatic security protocols, which eventually connected to the postal investigation I had initiated. "You started something you didn't fully understand," Jonah said, refilling my glass. "But it turned out to be exactly the right something. Funny how that works." I asked if he'd known from the beginning that federal agencies would get involved. He shrugged. "I suspected. When certain things go missing, certain people notice. I just didn't know how fast they'd move once they had a reason to look." The final piece of closure came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after Victoria's arrest. I was working in my home office when my phone buzzed with a delivery notification. I walked to the front door, opened it, and found a small package sitting on my porch. The tracking information confirmed delivery at 2:37 p.m. The box was intact, unopened, and addressed correctly. I stood there for a moment, holding it in my hands, feeling the weight of something so ordinary, yet so significant. For 18 months, I had fought for the simple right to receive what I ordered, to have my property respected, to live in a community where authority served residents rather than exploiting them. The package contained nothing special, just a phone charger I'd needed to replace. But as I carried it inside and set it on my desk, I understood that its safe arrival represented everything we had accomplished. Victoria Langford was in federal prison. The HOA had been reformed. The neighbors who had suffered in silence now had a voice. And packages, finally, were being delivered to the people who ordered them. I looked out my window at the quiet street, at Ruth Mallory watering her chrysanthemums, at Henry Atwood checking his mailbox without fear, at the ordinary peace of a neighborhood that had learned to protect itself. Justice doesn't always arrive with helicopters and handcuffs. Sometimes it comes in a cardboard box, delivered right to your door, exactly as it should be. Sometimes justice arrives quietly, in a cardboard box on your doorstep. Sometimes it lands with helicopter blades shaking the windows. Either way, karma always finds its address. If this story reminded you that patience, evidence, and persistence can bring down even the most untouchable abusers of power, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Karma Fence and hit the notification bell so you never miss the moment when the next person who thought they were above consequences discovers they were wrong. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever witnessed karma deliver exactly what someone deserved?